Views expressed on the Own It podcast are that of Gunnar Esiason and his guests, and not necessarily those of the Boomer Esiason Foundation. Nothing in the Own It podcast should be considered medical advice. Such advice can only be given by a physician who is experienced with cystic fibrosis. The Boomer Esiason Foundation, Gunnar Esiason, and his guests cannot be held responsible for any damage which may result from using the information on this podcast without the permission of your medical doctor. You're listening to the Own It podcast, presented by the Boomer Esiason Foundation. Now, here's Gunnar Esiason.
Hello, everyone. I'm Gunnar Esiason, and thank you for joining us for Episode 5 of the Own It audio podcast series, presented by Boomer Esiason Foundation and GunnarEsiason.com. This podcast, College Roommates Part 1, was made possible by an unrestricted educational grant from Novartis to the Boomer Esiason Foundation. A really common question that I've gotten since starting my blog and podcasting is whether or not a person with CF should have roommates in college. So today I'm introducing you to my college roommates, David O'Kane, Carmen Gatta, Matt Flynn, and Vince Love, so they can share with you their experiences of living with someone who has cystic fibrosis. Because we have so much ground to cover, I'm going to dedicate 2 separate podcasts to this topic, so be on the lookout for Part 2 next week. For Part 1, I want to talk about my transition into college and have my buddies share a little bit about how each of them played an evolving role in my CF support system. Guys, why don't you say hello to our listeners, introduce yourself, and tell everyone where you lived with me.
Hey everyone, I'm David O'Kane. I'm currently living and working in New York City. I grew up on Long Island where I went to high school and then college with Gunnar. So I've been fortunate enough to know Gunnar for over 10 years now.
Hey everyone, this is Carmen Gatta. I'm also living and working in New York City right now. I lived across the hall freshman year from David and Gunnar, and then also lived with Gunnar my sophomore, junior, and senior year.
Hey guys, this is Vince Love. I'm currently in the process of moving to New York to start a new job later this summer, and I met Gunnar freshman year and lived with him sophomore year and senior year.
Hey guys, this is Matt Flynn. I met Gunnar and the guys freshman year when we all lived on the same floor. Then moved in with the team junior year and senior year. And I'm currently living and working in New York as well.
All right, cool. Thanks, guys. So I want to start with you, David. I'll call you Dave for the podcast because we're such close buddies. Dave and I went to high school together, as he said, then decided we'd be roommates freshman year at Boston College. Dave, do you remember when we decided we were going to room together? And when did you know that I started dealing with CF? And since... did you have any idea what it would be like to live with a CF patient day in and day out?
Yeah, so when I knew you had CF from obviously going to high school with you, but it was a little more masked because we weren't living together, so I didn't really see the behind the scenes of the disease at first. But I guess the first time I kind of started to understand and put everything together and the responsibilities that go with it were right after we decided that we were rooming together. I remember I was actually at your house and your parents pulled me aside and kind of gave me a talk about everything that I should expect and all the different treatments and everything that go into the disease and how being clean is such an important part of everything. And so I guess that was the first time everything kind of sunk in for me.
Now, do you have any memories, specifically the first couple of weeks of college, different memories from maybe a normal college experience where something out of the ordinary may have happened because I had CF or we were acting a little differently, sort of in the sense that we encountered a situation that was beyond the norm for a normal college student. Do you remember anything like that, Dave?
Well, I think the one thing that's great about you is that you don't hide it all and you don't try to hide the fact that you have CF. So I remember you were doing your treatments, and we would just have our door open freshman year. And this is actually how we ended up meeting a lot of our good friends, including the Carmen and Vince and Flynn, who are in this chat. But you'd be sitting there doing your nebulizer, and people were coming in, and you're explaining everything to them. And I think it was not only a good way for us to meet people freshman year, but it's also a good way to kind of, teach people about the disease.
Yeah, now for the rest of you guys, do you guys have any specific memories of those moments when I either kept the door open or I was doing treatments out in the open? Do you guys ever think about that? Do you guys have any memories? Let's start with you, Carmen, since you lived across the hall. Do you ever remember walking in and being like, wow, this guy's doing a nebulizer? What is that? Do you have a specific memory that you can speak to?
Yeah, I mean, like Dave said, you guys always kept your door open, and it was pretty clear that, you were doing something, doing treatments, obviously. And I actually remember, like, probably the first week, we were all sitting in your guys' room, and I think you were doing a nebulizer. And I think Vince was sitting next to you at the time. He had asked you what were you doing, and you had said originally that you had asthma. And Vince was like, "Oh, I have asthma too." And then you were like, "Oh, well, it's like a different type of asthma. It's like, called cystic fibrosis, this. And then I really didn't know what that was. I don't know, Vince, if you can, confirm this. I don't know. It's a little vague, but and then I think after that is when I like, maybe like looked it up or looked exactly, because I hadn't heard that before. I mean, you were definitely the first time I'd ever, been introduced to, the disease, but. Yeah, that's the one memory I have.
I do remember that, and I remember early on, Gunnar, you talking about it and being pretty open about it, and I actually had a friend who had a cousin that had the disease, so I was vaguely familiar with it, but similar to what Dave said earlier, where he wasn't living with you, so it was a little bit masked. I obviously didn't live with this person that had CF, so I didn't see the full extent of it until we really lived together, and I saw you do your treatments day in and day out.
All right, cool. Now, did any of you have any initial thoughts? Flynn, do you remember? Matt, do you remember when I either told you CF or when you found out? Do you remember anything around that time?
Yeah, I mean, just to piggyback on what Dave said, I guess you've always been very open with your treatments and with CF in general, and I think that was incremental in really allowing us to get a better handle on what it was you were and are going through, and the sorts of things that we ultimately as roommates were able to do to be most accommodative and helpful, and really ultimately it helped us all look after each other, but being so open about it really helped us to get a much better understanding, and made the transition really smooth when we ultimately became roommates, and I think that was really incremental in terms of making it seamless for all of us, and especially for you, Gunnar.
Yeah, I totally agree. Now, did anyone have any concerns? I remember, when someone finds out that a friend or a relative or an acquaintance, really, someone may have CF. There's obviously a lot of questions that go through the mind. Did anyone have anything specifically that either came up? Any hesitations to be around me? A lot of the time, people think that the CF cough is one that's contagious. Did any of you guys ever have any of those suspicions?
No, I don't. This is Vince. I don't remember having any of those worries initially. I think when we all first found out, I think we were all more just wondering to what extent you had it. I mean, obviously we had just met you. We didn't know, how serious it was. But I think that was kind of the first thing that went through my mind. Like I said, I was vaguely familiar with the disease beforehand, so I knew it wasn't contagious or anything like that. But I can't really speak for the other guys. I don't know if you guys have anything else.
Crickets. All right, cool. So, moving on from there. At what point did it seem normal for me to be doing treatments around you guys, or taking pills? That's obviously another big part of the disease, is taking the enzymes every single day with every single meal. That's definitely something that draws a lot of looks out the crowd. Specifically for you, Carmen, you lived across the hall from us. So, do you ever remember trying to go to sleep at night and maybe hearing the nebulizers or the vest machine from across the hall?
I don't know. Once we were in our respective room, like, you couldn't hear the nebulizer or the vest or anything like that. But like, if you were to step outside in the hallway, sometimes you could hear that like rumbling noise coming from the room. And for me, honestly, that was just like more of an indication that you were in your room and probably willing to, play video games or hang out for a bit, So that was probably, I was probably more likely to just like pop my head in and.
It's an interesting way to look at it, for sure. That's definitely pretty interesting, because obviously, I guess that was an indication that I was just free, doing nothing, wanting to hang out.
And that's probably when we played our most NHL games.
Yeah, lots of NHL games freshman year.
Absolutely.
But as far as taking pills or anything like that, I think I definitely credit you guys to being on top of me a lot of the time with making sure I was taking my pills at the right time. at what point? What I really want to ask here is, at what point during the first year of college did you guys feel comfortable enough around me to see that the disease and the maintenance of the disease was second nature?
I mean, I would say it was pretty early on. I mean, as Dave alluded to earlier, you were pretty open about your treatments and you weren't afraid to do them in front of us. So I would say kind of from the start, we were exposed to it. So it wasn't anything out of the ordinary to come in and see you doing your treatments or anytime we would eat, taking your enzymes or anything like that. So I would say it was pretty early on that we got accustomed to it. And I think that was mostly just because of the fact that you weren't afraid to hide it and you did it out in the open and we were all aware.
Yeah, totally agree. All right, so now moving on to a little more serious subject here. Obviously, my freshman year, towards the end of that second semester, I developed an exacerbation, and I actually had to take quasi-medical leave. Do you guys remember seeing me the first time I got sick, and what were your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I'll take this one. Living with you, I kind of see, I got to see the day in and day out that goes into everything. And I know the biggest thing really, at least for being your roommate, was you had to keep everything clean. And I know that once you got sick towards the end of the year, big part of the disease I found was that you kind of have to be honest with yourself. And I feel like I can speak for you, Gunnar, sometimes when you get a little stubborn about the disease. And, you're such a tough kid that you don't necessarily want to, admit that you're, as sick as you are. And so there's definitely times, especially at the end of freshman year, when I kind of had to step in and actually was in contact with your parents, kind of giving them behind the scenes information, and kind of felt like their little spy. But that was definitely the first time that I felt the real impact of everything, and it was definitely a scary moment and something that was definitely a learning experience, I think, for everyone.
Did you guys miss me when I was gone?
You were very missed.
Oh yeah, that's very reassuring. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I, like I said here, I had an exacerbation towards the end of freshman year of college, and I actually had to step out for about a month. I remember coming back and finding the entire dorm room rearranged. So that was a pretty
for the better.
Oh yeah, and why is that?
The dorm room was clearly a better arrangement than when you left.
Can you speak to that specifically, please?
How your dorm room was arranged?
Okay, that's fine.
I'm a little confused.
All right, so we'll move on from that. Now, do you think you learned anything new from living in those first 2 years? Obviously, Dave spoke about his cleanliness and organizational skills.
I never said I was organized, but I said you had to be clean.
I think I saw the same thing. I think cleanliness does go alongside organizational skills. I mean, I can. If you can speak about me and say when I was sick, I can tell you that your organizational skills from day one of college to the end of freshman year vastly improved.
Oh, night and day.
Oh yeah, you were a mess for those first couple of weeks there. It's
a learning experience.
It's a hard learning curve. But for the rest of you guys, do you guys think you learned anything positively or even negatively from living with me, living near me, living around me?
I mean, I think by the time that I moved in with you guys, one thing that you all had learned to do, which I think is a big part of anyone with CF, is developed a routine and had a schedule. Obviously, Gunnar was doing his treatments twice a day, and kind of having that structure, I think, is really important, just to make sure that you're doing your meds in the morning, you're taking your pills at the right time, and like Carmen said, I mean, when you're doing treatments in the morning or the evening, it became part of all of our routines, and that was kind of built-in hangout time that we knew just before, just after dinner, Gunnar was going to be hanging out, watching TV, playing Xbox, something like that, and it really became a part of all of our routines. So I think that definitely, structure is something that's good when you're moving away from home and you're trying to build a calendar for yourself intraday, and that was something I think we all learned to do and was a really important part of anyone's life with CF, is to have that routine daily in and out. So that was definitely something that I picked up on when I moved in with you guys.
Very cool. All right, so we're sort of coming towards the end of this first podcast here. This part one. Does anyone have any advice for, let's say, someone with CF is going off to college, right, and is going to get matched with a roommate? Do any of you guys have advice for that roommate of the person with CF? How to approach the subject to make the person with CF feel comforted or welcomed, or basically to make the person feel like he isn't alone in the world? Does anyone have any advice for those first few weeks there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, not to sound like a broken record, I know we've said this multiple times throughout this podcast, but you were very upfront with it and open about it from the beginning, and I definitely think that went a long way. So I would just encourage anyone else who's worried about going to college with CF to do the same, and in the spirit of the name of the podcast, to own it and just, be upfront about it, and people will definitely help.
Yeah, I think going off what Vince just said, it's definitely extremely important to kind of be upfront about everything with your friends, because then it definitely helps you get into a routine, and you can kind of structure your nights and your social life around treatments, and if you get everyone on board and all your friends know what's going on, it just makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you guys. I always felt you guys were really the first line of defense or my biggest advocates when it came to making plans or developing a routine, like you guys said. And I think that definitely goes a lot along the way with trusting each other. And I felt like the only way you guys were going to trust me is if I was upfront with my entire life. And I'm glad to see that paid off. So anyways, we're coming here towards the end of the first podcast. And at the end of my podcast, I like to do a little bit of a word association game. Now, since David and Carmen were the first two guys to live with me, we're going to go with you guys first for this part one here, and then Matt and Vince will go with part two. So, Dave, you're going to start out here. I'm going to say a word. It's going to be a CF associated word, and then I want you to say the first thing that comes to mind based on the word that I say. All right?
Okay.
Once you're David, here we go. The first word is enzyme.
Lunch.
Second word is vest.
Shake.
Pretty lame. All right, now we're on to Carmen here. All right, ready, Carmen? All right, first word is nebulizer.
Treatments.
Okay, and then cough.
Shot clock.
CF.
Nice. Oh my God, that is really lame. That is really lame. All right. Well, again, thanks everyone for listening, and thanks guys for being a part of this podcast series. Here on GunnarEsiason.com. If you want to hear the podcast about something specifically, you can always write to me. You can email me at gunnarsblog@esiason.org, or tweet me or message me on Facebook. And thanks again. This is Gunnar Esiason signing off.
You've been listening to Gunnar Esiason's Own It podcast. If you would like more information on cystic fibrosis or the Boomer Esiason Foundation, please visit our website at www.esiason.org.